Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Couples Academy show. My name is Hasani.
And I'm Danielle.
And we're back. It's been quite a long time.
We are back.
Been on a hiatus.
It's been a serious hiatus. 2024 has been a lot more. And so we have been doing all the things necessary to be able to charge up and come to you correct.
That's right.
Really.
And we're back.
And we're back.
And there's so much to talk about, so much to dive into. Listen, I'm going to just be transparent with you. There's a lot of people who reach out to us who are struggling. And they're struggling because they just discovered that a betrayal has hit their home and they're trying to make sense of it. And oftentimes there are numerous conversations that are happening between the spouse and themselves, trying to unpack what has occurred, why it's occurred. And it leaves so many people lost and clueless as to really making sense of things. And so we want to dive into a series that we're going to take our time with that I think is going to be really instrumental in helping to facilitate these conversations. And so one of the things that the betrayed spouse always needs to understand is the affair.
Yeah.
Why did this happen? Where did it come from? What was going on? And so full disclosure is an important step that we like to take couples through, but oftentimes they're having so many conversations on their own. And even with the best of intentions, these conversations just don't go well.
It's true. And it's funny. It makes me think of this song that I just heard where this lady is singing about talking to the walls, and the walls are in agreement with her. The walls know more about how she feels than you do or the spouse did. And it's kind of like that when there's no full disclosure. That why, that big question that's looming over the person. It's like having a wound with a knife still stabbed in it, right? It could never heal, right? The knife is in there, and until you pull that knife out and you put together the ligaments, which are deep down inside, and then you fix the bone and the skin has to heal, there's layers to this, right? And so oftentimes we're stuck at the why, and we can't heal, we can't move on because we don't have clarity or understanding about what actually happened, especially those that are completely blindsided, right? There are some that have been in a relationship with their partner and there was infidelity from the beginning, even during the dating stages. And so even though they're working through the infidelity, it's not like they were blindsided by it. But there are a lot of people that come to us who had no clue. They thought everything was going well, and then bam, the infidelity strikes the marriage.
Yeah, and when any type of trauma happens to a person, there has to be a debriefing. There has to be some type of form of counseling. Just think about people who go through war, or people, I think about 9/11, the victims of 9/11, not those who passed, but those who actually survived it. A lot of them had to go into deep dive counseling to really get to have a search for meaning as to why something like this would happen and how to deal with the trauma. And so likewise, when it comes to the relationship, there's a difference between restoration and healing. See, you can work towards the restoring of the relationship that you have with your spouse, but then there's the personal individual healing that you have to go through. So we've seen many couples where the unfaithful spouse, they're good, but the betrayed spouse is hurting. Their heart is bleeding. And so it requires that both of them get the attention that they need to go through a healing process so that they can truly restore. That's the key. And so that's why we're going to be diving into this conversation to unpack some things. Keep talking.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you said that because, here at Couples Academy, we don't just focus on the betrayed partner. We focus on both parties, the betrayed and the betrayer, because there's only one way to heal the marriage, and that's for both individuals to come back to the table whole. So, we do a lot of work with the betrayed, the unfaithful as well. Like, why? How did you get here? What is your pathology, and how did you learn that this was a good way to resolve your problems? When did you decide that, I'm not getting enough in this marriage, so the answer is to go out and find it somewhere else? Was it an ego thing? Was it an insecurity thing? Was it something in your childhood where you felt like you weren't enough? And so you've learned not to deal with the real issues at hand. You've learned that, I can't ask for what I want, so I'm not even going to communicate these issues to my spouse, which oftentimes happens because those folks that come here that are completely blindsided, they're like, why didn't you tell me? Like, you never even told me. I never saw this coming. What was it that you could could not approach your spouse. And so we look at both sides of the partnership to help bring about restoration. So powerful point.
Now, what's interesting is that there was a survey done by about 465 therapists. And interestingly enough, 41% of them agree that it probably is not a good idea for the betrayed spouse to ask questions and to get answers from their partner regarding the affair. The advice was just move on. Don't deal with that pain, because talking about it will only make matters worse. And I find that interesting because overwhelmingly, most therapists, now any counselor you go to, any therapist you go to, any pastor you go to, any coach you go to will tell you, yeah, we have experience working with people who have had an affair. Well, guess what? I mean, if I do this and point in any direction, I'm going to find a couple who's experienced some type of affair in their marriage. But that doesn't qualify the therapist to be able to work with you. We've all had experiences dealing with people who have had this type of trauma, but it doesn't mean that they're trained, they're proficient, they're skilled, and they have a knowledge base to know how to navigate people through a process. The number one thing we do when we work with couples is take them through full disclosure. Mm-hmm. So the fact that 41% would say you shouldn't have those conversations is insane.
It is.
And it kills the recovery process.
There's a big lie. This book called Healing is a Choice. One of the big lies is that it does no good to look into your past. And that is a lie that many of us have been taught, right? It's how we cope. It's like, you know, it happened in the past. Don't even deal with it. Move on. And so we bury things that are serious issues, and we've buried them completely alive. It's just like if you had a bad root canal. You know, if you've ever had one, you know that thing throbs. Even though you had the root canal, the tooth has been taken out, the nerve has supposedly been taken out. If they did something wrong, that tooth that's no longer even there still is throbbing, right? And so it's the same thing. Even though you're no longer experiencing whatever the trauma is, if you don't look at the details, if you're not able to literally take a magnifying glass and look at the details of the situation so that you can have closure, you will be forced to bury that thing alive, and it will constantly resurface in your life. And that's what I think happens for people. It's like sometimes people are coming to us, the affair happened 30 years ago, and they just kind of dealt with it their own way. They never went to anybody who was a professional. They just kind of moved past it. And out of nowhere, it's still lurking. The pain is still lurking. I never got closure. How did you end the affair? What was the details? How did you meet him or her? All those questions are still there, even though you tried to move past it without dealing with the details.
And that's an excellent point. Trying to move past the details is not going to help you. And therapists who think this way, they're really doing more harm than good. Now, Peggy Vaughn, many of you may not have never heard of that name before, but she is really like the godmother, if you will, of all affair recovery. Like, she's one of the progenitors, one of the original ones that did a lot of research. She interviewed over 1,000 betrayed spouses and asked them, was the conversations about the affair helpful? And overwhelmingly, they all concluded that talking about the affair actually helped them to heal. In fact, a study was done, and it says that 86% of 86% of the people who answered questions, like the questions were asked, the answers were given, 86% remain married, 72% rebuilt trust. But for those couples who chose not to discuss it, or in most cases, the former unfaithful, they don't want to talk about it. They just want to move forward. They don't want to deal with it. When they don't answer the questions and engage their spouse in conversations, 59% remain married and 31% restored trust. Now let's look at those numbers again. Those who had the conversations, 86 remain married, 72% restored trust. Those who didn't, only 59% remain married and 31% restored trust. That's a huge disparity.
It's a huge disparity. I think there's something healing that takes place also with the disclosure, right? Because you've got all this stinking thinking and lies and secrets pent up inside of you. They bubble to the surface from time to time. You're thinking about it, ruminating on it, and you just shove it back down. So the disclosure is holding the toxicity as well. So they get an opportunity to release that. So even they heal in the process. So now you are healing on both sides because you've released that information to the person that needs to know, and you've released it so you're better and you can move forward. It's a powerful statistic. See, every statistic, which is facts, has a spiritual connection to it. How it actually physically affects you spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally. Like, these things are real. You can't walk around with a whole bunch of secrets without it affecting you and affecting your marriage, right? So the success rate is obvious. If you're stuck in a marriage with somebody who refuses to disclose truths, how about somebody that just refuses to just be transparent about things, to just be honest about things? You can never get a beat on what they're thinking. All of that is frustrating. But in the event of an affair, even more so.
Yeah. So if you are the unfaithful partner, if you were the one who really broke the vow of the marriage, and your spouse is looking for questions to be answered, they're looking for healing in their own personal life. If you truly love them, if you want to increase the chances of restoring the relationship, you have to have the difficult conversations and answer those questions, because it will help quantum leap you as a couple. Listen, we're talking about understanding the affair. This is just part one of a series that we're really going to go into a deep dive on. But listen, we want to take a quick break, share some quick announcements with you, and come back on the other side of that and continue this conversation. So stay right there. You're watching the Couples Academy Show.
Yes, yes, yes. I don't know if you know it, but Couples Academy also has retreats, and the Unearthed Women's Retreat is coming up April 25th through the 28th. You don't want to miss it. If you are a woman, if you are a mom, if you are a wife and need to step away from all that you do to be recharged, to have your cup filled, and to really dig into some issues, we all, guys, gals, we all have trauma and drama and baggage. Go somewhere where you can leave all that stuff behind. Find out more at couplesacademy.org/events.
The link is actually in the description, so it'll take you straight to the registration page to sign up for that retreat. Listen, all of you who've been watching us, take the next step. Take the plunge, right? Stop sitting on the sidelines. Stop being a spectator. Get in the game and experience the personal transformation that you need. So register today. We're talking about understanding the affair. I want to read first of all, you know, I wanted to read a statement here in this book. It's a phenomenal book about infidelity. And it says, everybody, including our therapist, tells me that I'm crazy to keep digging for details. I only know that I can't rest until the whole story is told.
Right.
And it made me think about the fact, I had to go in my garage and grab this, right? So this is what happens. The betrayed spouse is digging and digging and digging and digging. And this is a pretty big shovel. And the reason why they keep digging is because there's a whole lot that needs to be unpacked. And so when the affair happens, what we try to do is we try to hide it, and we try to dig a hole, stick it in the ground, cover it up with dirt, and move forward. But what happens is when something's dead, it rots. There's a stench, there's a smell. I can smell it, but I don't know where it is. And I got to keep looking and looking and looking until I find it. And that is what the betrayed spouse ultimately wants to do. And they become obsessed and preoccupied until they get the answers to the story, until they crack the code. And you, my friend, play a major role in this unpacking, and your refusal to engage in the conversation makes it tremendously difficult.
I love the shovel analogy because we use that in Unearth because, of course, you are unearthing a problem, right? But we say that you're hitting a body. You're digging until you hit the coffin, right? And inside the coffin, like Hasani said, is that dead, rotting, stinking body that's alive. It's a whole zombie in your life. You can't get rid of it. Everywhere you turn, it's there. You know, what happened? What is the details? What are the story? What is the closure? And so you have to have an empathy. You have to understand how important the why is. But I do understand that the why sometimes is elusive to the former betrayer. Sometimes they don't know why they did it. It's just a way that it's always been. It's all that they've ever seen. That's what their mother did, their father did. And they really have never sat down long enough to figure out their own why. And so they run from that question. And that's really not the thing to do. Instead, because you don't know your own why, that's where it starts. Your spouse needs to understand what happened. Where was the breakdown? Do I even know you? Did I marry the person that I thought that I married? And in some regards, maybe they didn't, because they didn't know that you didn't even know what you were capable of, right? And so it takes time for you to sit down long enough to dig within yourself, to take that shovel and do your own digging and your own unearthing to see, okay, what am I missing? In my pathology, I understand that my parents, I don't care how well-intentioned, can only give me what they had. So if I'm sitting in here and I'm meditating, what did they have? What was missing? What did I see that I shouldn't have? What did I take from my upbringing that I should have left behind? That's the digging that you need to do so that you can formulate your why for yourself. Now that you know why you did it, you can set barriers around your own life to make sure that you don't do it again. But also you get to give the beautiful glimmering gift of a silver knife to stab that zombie to death so that your spouse can go free. And that's all that they want. They want to be able to go free. I think oftentimes people want certainty, which I think is crazy, because certainty is kind of an impossibility. There's no such thing as certainty. We have no certainty. Certainty would mean that we have control, but that's what we desire. We want a sense of knowing that, hey, you are not going to do this again. But if you can't even open up your heart to express to them why you did this and why you're going to do everything in your power to never do it again, and here are the boundaries that I'm setting now that I'm aware that will ensure that it never happens again, they won't have peace. Yeah. And that's the certainty that you can give them, understanding the why.
If you think about having these discussions, think about a magnifying glass. When you have a magnifying glass, it enlarges what it is that you're looking at. And so as a couple, it's important for both the betrayed spouse and the unfaithful spouse to take a look at this affair together. Oftentimes there are comparisons that are being made. We compare the marriage to the affair. It's an unfair comparison because the very foundation of each is so completely different. And so, but what we see is, wow, there was so much excitement. There was so much fun. There was so much laughter. There was a chemistry. There was a connection. There was a high emotional intensity that you had in this affair relationship. It's important to understand how you got to that place. This is why it's so important that as a couple, in addition to having these conversations, you take a deeper dive into understanding the anatomy of an affair. Because once you understand the anatomy of an affair, now you can measure it up against the affair that took place in the relationship.
Yes. That's deep knowledge. That's what everybody needs to understand. You may not want to understand all that in the midst of it, right? Because that's the details and that's the technical. And right now I'm caught up in my emotions and how I feel about it. I don't want to empathize with the person that betrayed me. I don't want to understand the anatomy of it, right? Because that's what you're asking, right? I'm asking you both to sit down. Let's break this down and help you understand why this happened. No, there's no reason why this could happen. There's no excusable reason. That's what you get. But that understanding brings so much peace and so much closure.
It's interesting because in these long-term affairs that people have, there are things that you initially had in the beginning of the relationship that wasn't maintained. And we talk about how there was this law of attraction that brings you and your spouse together. But that attraction withers and wanes, right? And now there's a law of attachment that keeps you with that spouse. So even when the attraction is no longer there, you're attached to that person. But in the affair, there's this attraction, right? So the things that we used to do that we don't do anymore, I now do with someone else. See, this is why we need to understand the anatomy of an affair. What would cause this long-term committed relationship that we were both in? We both made vows. We both made a decision that we would be together for the rest of our lives. How did you get caught up? How were you tempted? How were you whisked away? These are the things that need to be discussed when talking about the betrayal, because if we don't discuss these things, I'll never be able to make sense of this. As they say, that math is not mathing, right? 1 + 1 = 2, but you're trying to convince me that there's another answer, and it's just not making sense. So the more you begin to understand the anatomy of it, and this is to your point, Danielle, because you said sometimes the unfaithful partner doesn't even know. Like, they need to do a deeper dive. They need to self-reflect and dig within oneself to find out that answer, or seek someone for help to get that answer.
And another point to consider is that sometimes the betrayed spouse doesn't want to know, right? Because these are personality styles involved in this too, right? Some people are need to know type people. They need every single solitary detail fact. They want to know what it smelled like in the room, what it looked like, positions, poses. They want to know every dollar that was spent. They want to know what cologne and outfit you wore, how was your hair parted, all of that. They want to know everything to the letter. Don't leave anything out because you are betraying them. But then on the opposite side of that, you really have a lot of people that just don't want to know all the details, right? They are simple. They want to know, okay, just confess that you did it and that you're not going to do it again. Can I just get that small confession that you did it? And that for many people is so hard to do. It's like, if you didn't have the evidence, if you didn't catch me in the act and you didn't see me doing it, I'm going to deny until I die. And that's unfortunate, because some folks who are, receipt keepers, they have all the receipts. They're just waiting on you to acknowledge it and to admit it. So it really depends on the person, how much you want to know. I think the point is that you do need to know. As much as you think you don't, you do need to know so that you can settle it.
So let's talk about that. There's these different personality types. As you say, some need to know, some don't want to know. So what if the person who needs to know is the betrayed spouse, and they're married to somebody, the unfaithful, that typically if the shoe were in the other foot, they wouldn't want to know. So now they project their not wanting to know on their spouse who has a need to know. And that makes the recovery process difficult, because now we can't have an open and honest conversation. So if there are different personality types, that's why it's important to have a therapist or a practitioner or a coach who understands the personality types, because you can give the right advice to the wrong person or the wrong advice to the right person, and the recovery process.
You are so right about it. It could be one word that you say to the wrong person. How do you feel about that? And it's just like a whole, like I don't even understand the word feeling. Well, what do you think about that? And then you'll get an answer, right? So it really does matter who it is that you're talking to. But at the end of the day, what I'm trying to put out, point I'm trying to make is that oftentimes people who think that they don't want to know, it's because of fear, right? They're fear-based and they don't want to deal with the pain of knowing all the details. So they're terrified about knowing the details. So they'll just sweep it under the rug. They'll know the basics. They just can't handle the thinking of the processing. If I knew all the details, now I'm going to be ruminating. I'm going to picture it, make my own movie in my head, and I'll see it over and over again. But it is so important for you to know specific details. Maybe not every single solitary detail, but certain things need to be fully disclosed so that you can once and for all put it away And when you do that, see, here's the thing people are fighting against and they don't even know. They want to get past it, you know? They want to lift the anchor up and sail away, never to feel this pain, never to see this situation again. But they're fighting it because they don't want to go through the process. What you really want is for you to be able to actually remember the situation happened, think about it, or something reminds you of the date and not be bothered. That's where you want to be. If you are at the place where you can remember it and now you can be a voice and tell somebody else, yes, I know how you're feeling because I was there too. Let me tell you how I got out. That's healing. That's how healing happens. So don't fight the process. You got to go with the process and do the work that is necessary so that the healing can take place. And that starts with full disclosure.
Absolutely. Full disclosure allows the betrayed spouse to understand what has happened so that they can dot the I, cross the T's, close loops, make sense of things, because until it makes sense, I will continue to ruminate over this particular betrayal. But once it makes sense, it's like the pieces of a puzzle. When all the pieces come together and I put that last piece in the puzzle and I can see the full image of things, I can now move forward. It also, in closing, helps to restore the trust. Listen, what you did was deception, right? It was a lie. It was trickery. It was secrecy involved. And now your willingness to unpack it and expose it allows the trust to begin. Trust is the process. As they say, it's lost in buckets and gained in drops. But it begins with full disclosure. Now, point that was taken, Prince of Petty, he actually said, those conversations don't go well at all. And you're right. For most couples, they absolutely do not go well.
Yeah.
But this is why you want somebody to facilitate this conversation.
They don't go well because you didn't learn the rules of engagement. Like, when did you ever learn how to disagree or to agree about something? You've never learned that. All you've ever heard was, we'll just agree to disagree. Or you've never heard that you have to have a meeting of the minds when it comes to these things. When you learn the rules of engagement, just like in any war, every country, there are rules, right? You tear a country up, you got to invest and build it up. That's kind of how it goes, right? So once you learn how to do these things, it's not so complicated and they can go so much better as long as the people are willing to follow the rules.
So guys, we're just getting started with this conversation and helping you to understand the affair. Remember, this is not just something that the betrayed spouse needs to understand. It's something that the former unfaithful spouse needs to understand as well if true healing and restoration is going to take place. But listen, watch this again with your spouse. Have a conversation and join us tomorrow at 9:30 as we continue in this series on the search for meaning of the affair. Take care, guys. Have a great day.
Bye.